Pittsburgh Pirates are 48-48 going into the All-Star break, which is here. How did we get here? We're going to discuss on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates, which is also now on Instagram at Locked On Pirates, bringing you all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans like you. Gary was just on vacation, kind of. He was there for work, but, he got to do some vacation-y things. Maybe he used Booking.com for his hotel. Probably not, but make sure you use Booking.com to go check out your rival cities this summer. And, Gary, I don't know what it is, but the coffee tastes a lot better today. I don't know if it's College Football 25 coming out later. I don't know if it's the Pirates taking Connor Griffin at 9. Go check out that great show I did last night. You guys absolutely loved it. I don't know if it's the Pirates being at 500 for the first time since 2016. What has me so happy this morning, Gary? What's going on?
I don't know. I mean, are you allowed to be happy about a 500 team? I mean,
I don't know. Yeah, is that in the unwritten rules of baseball? If a team is 500, is it okay to be happy? I know in soccer, Gary, if a team ties and it's 0-0 or 1-1, it's okay. It's fine in most cases. They didn't win and they didn't lose. But you didn't mention it. They are exactly 500 at the All-Star break, as I mentioned, for the first time since 2016. Coming off the heels in that point of 3 consecutive playoff appearances, 2 very different teams, 2 very different regimes in the front office, 2 very different things going on everywhere. And it was interesting how we got to this point because they got off to the good start. Things kind of teetered down. And then from May 7th on to before the White Sox series, they had the second longest streak ever of not winning 3 games in a row and not losing 3 games in a row. So they've been a very mediocre team, which I always love to tell this to people, Gary, that mediocre is better than bad. I think people forget that sometimes. And that's what the Pirates have been for the most part since the season began, is a mediocre baseball team with a very good pitching staff, not such good offense. But how did we get here, Gary? How do you think the Pirates have managed to get to 48-48 at this point?
The long story is they stunk for a long time and acquired talent and built the team back up to this respectable level through years of stinking. That's the long answer. The short answer is, most people that were paying attention saw that the roster was stronger this year. Just not 100% sure how things were going to come together. And nobody ever is. They took some flyers on some guys that didn't pan out. They took some flyers on some guys that started to pan out. They were stubborn about other players that showed up big time, like Bailey Falter, Rowdy Tellez. Stubborn on other players that really never did. Jared Triolo, G1 Bay for a while there. Joshua Palacios, Jack Sawinski we're still seeing. So I don't know. I think it's a 500 team. I think it was always going to be a 500 team. I think by the time this season's over, even with acquisitions, it's going to be around a 500 team.
Yeah, and you've been saying that pretty much on this show and your own show for pretty much the entire year and even before the year started. I predicted 84 wins before the year started. Now that's going to be kind of tough to get to at this point at 48-48, especially with the gauntlet of a schedule that they have welcoming them out of the All-Star break. I talked about that a little bit on my show yesterday, so we won't go crazy into it. But I think now that pre-All-Star is done and you look at what this team has, obviously they have the strong pitching staff. Despite the injuries to Bailey Falter and Jared Jones, this pitching staff still looks very much like a strength right now. And that's just something that plenty of teams really just hope to have every single year, is 8 or 9 guys that they can look at and say, we can pin them in the rotation and feel comfortable. I think the Pirates are there. You then shift to what the talking point most of the time is, Gary, and it's the offense. You still have Brian Reynolds playing at an all-star level. You have Rowdy Tellez, who's picked it up as of late. You have Ke'Bryan Hayes, who even as of late, albeit not a great season, has played a lot better. O'Neal Cruz has shown flashes of brilliance in what he could be over a consistent 162-game season. And you look at all this stuff coming together, and I don't think it's hard for people to have their expectations tempered a little bit, at least on the offensive side. So with just what is here now, because that's all that matters, is what is here currently on Monday, July 15th, what are your expectations for that group specifically? Not the pitching, just the offense post All-Star. Because I think this team doesn't get anywhere unless the guys that are currently here right now take a step forward.
Yeah, I mean, collectively, I think they'll pretty much stay right where they're at. If they don't make any improvements, I think there's potential for a slight uptick, and that's about it. The only reason I say that is because let's take a very simple, for instance, like you have somebody like Rowdy Tellez who stunk at the beginning of the year, kind of got carried by Connor Joe. Now Connor Joe's scuffling and Rowdy Tellez is carrying him. So it's maybe more accurate to say, what are we getting out of first base than it is to expect all 13 or 14 guys at a time to be clicking. Like Kutch is down right now, but there was a period about a month ago where he was kind of the hottest guy going and he was leading everything. Maybe it's time to like back off a little bit on him as far as playing every single day. Let somebody else take over as a left-handed DH if you have to for a minute. I think the potential's there for them to slightly improve internally. I don't think there's much there that they can't go out and acquire, at least that's going to affect this year.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about that current group as well, I think that's why fans and even probably the front office at this point have the idea that they have to go get something if they're truly going to kind of chase this wild card spot and chase the playoff picture, which they're currently in, folks. I mean, they're a game and a half out of the wild card right now. And as I mentioned yesterday with that schedule that they have with Philadelphia and St. Louis and Arizona and all these teams are going to play, you're going to figure out pretty quick if this team's going to be a part of this or not. Now, I'm not saying they could completely fall out of it, but it's going to be very difficult for them to, I think, with the pitching staff that they have. The additions are going to be as important as I think a few of the guys. Like you mentioned first base with Connor Joe and Rowdy Tellez. If you're not going to go out and acquire anybody at first base, you have to hope those guys click as a platoon. You're also looking at Ke'Bryan Hayes. You're not going to bench Ke'Bryan Hayes with what the contract that he has. It's just something I don't see happening. But if they went out and got a third baseman that could hit pretty well, I wouldn't be mad about it. That's just my thoughts on that. But you look at all these players that they have, it's going to gel together, I think, eventually. But I also had a very funny story that I wanted to tell about all this that I thought was fun. My uncle yesterday said, yeah, they're starting to finally play together. And I looked at him and I said, that's the problem, though. They always play together. He's like, what do you mean by that? I said, when they're playing good, everybody's playing good. When they're playing bad, everybody except pretty much Brian Reynolds is playing bad. So the playing together thing kind of plays two parts. And you're hoping that going into the second half or post All-Star, considering we only have under 70 games left at this point, Gary, that things just start to gel together the way they can at this point.
I think there's limited possibility for that. You know, like center field, for instance, is a position that it's not going to get much better unless you get like a real Jack Sawinski style, Jack Sawinski streak. They could do that, but you're not going to feel good about that position the entire rest of the season unless they do something. I mean, honestly, if Jack starts going on a tear tomorrow, it'll be a month before you trust him. And even then, you've got a couple years under your belt to know better. So, it's, to me, there's a couple positions they've got to think about upgrading, but it's down to a couple. It really is. We're not talking about like they have opportunities to just add all over the field and act like nothing's happened. They've got a lot of positions solidified enough to at least move forward with.
Yeah. And we can discuss that because over the next couple of weeks, I think it's going to get a little more crazy than people might think as far as the trade deadline is concerned. Trade deadline is going to take shape over the next couple weeks. So, what are the potential happenings of the next few weeks? And we're also going to talk about just living in the moment, and then more trade deadline thoughts on the rest of today's show here on Locked On Pirates. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, because right now it's the middle of the summer, and with summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. And yes, we're even talking about your rival cities with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival cities. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com on the website or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is also brought to you by Supply House. Shop Supply House for all of your plumbing, HVAC, and electrical product needs because you can get supplies from the site that is made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supply House is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online, and their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources on the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. After you listen to this show, make sure you listen to the Locked On Sports Today podcast, bringing you your news and analysis to everything going on in the world of sports, from the WNBA to NFL training camp, which is literally next week. Literally next week. This year is just going like this. And I said it on my show yesterday, Gary, that it felt like I was interviewing Michael McHenry about Henry Davis before the Marlins series yesterday. And now this season I've moved to Pennsylvania and it's July already and things are going nuts. And you look at what's going on right now. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, Gary, about this either, about the Pirates. They actually currently occupy MLB's longest winning streak.
Hey, I didn't even know that, Ethan. So there you go.
Yeah, 4-game winning streak right now. The next closest team, I believe, is the Los Angeles Angels at a 3-game winning streak. And I believe the Phillies would have tied the Pirates in that winning streak if they didn't let Lawrence Butler hit 3 home runs against them on Sunday and let the A's defeat them 19-4. But that's baseball. And right now, baseball is nuts. The trade deadline is going to probably also be pretty whack and nuts because the Chicago Cubs, who were dead to rights a week ago, are now 3.5 games out of the wild card. The Pirates, who we talk about all the time, Gary, are 1.5 games out. And you look all across the league, and there's still plenty of teams that are involved in the trade deadline and how they're going to be shaping this out. And it's July 15th. Trade deadline's only about 2.5 weeks away now. So now it's kind of getting to that point where we're thinking about the players that the Pirates are going to go after. We're trying to figure out what they need. Other teams are trying to figure out what they need. So what do you think is going to be kind of the strategy that we see over the next couple of weeks from this Pittsburgh team and how they shape everything out?
Yeah, I mean, I expect them to probably go and acquire something in the bullpen. I just don't think there's too many teams that feel like they're anywhere near position and don't. I also think we could kind of see the Pirates do some confusing things, like move some guys out that you think that they're depending on in exchange for something that they think they need. I could see this coming up with like a Aroldis Chapman, for instance, or I could even see there being a taker on a Connor Joe type, if it's something that you think can help you elsewhere. There's guys like that I think will potentially have a chance to get moved out of here. But for the most part, Ethan, man, it's a short list of teams still that are truly sellers. I think we're going to be looking for baseball trades. I think we're going to be looking for teams that are in it, trading with other teams that are in it, in the hopes that both sides benefit. And I think the Pirates need to be open to that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned the teams that would be considered sellers at this point, and there's been the 5 that we know: Miami, Colorado, the White Sox, the Athletics, and the Angels. I would kind of include Washington now, just because they're 6 games out of the wild card. We've already seen them make a deal with the Kansas City Royals to trade Hunter Harvey over there. Now, that may or may not be indicative of what they're going to do. I believe Hunter Harvey was an expiring contract that they moved. So you're going to see that a lot too, where a lot of these guys on expiring deals are going to move. And you had a great piece about trading Aroldis Chapman or keeping him on Steel City Pirates that rustled a lot of feathers, mind you. A lot of people. I was surprised by the amount of no's, like just flat no's that got out of there. And those are the kind of guys that you're going to see. And I had that big trade deadline primer piece to kind of showcase that the Pirates can be buyers, but also move on from players like this. Like, I would just argue right now, do they need Martin Perez? I mean, truthfully, do they need a guy like Martin Perez anymore when you have teams like the Dodgers or the Orioles or other teams that are in it, that pitching staffs have kind of lost some of that depth that they thought they had? And you could make a move there that could potentially figure some things out. Now, for the Pirates, just to make a joke here, I don't know if I want to trade any more pitchers to the Dodgers because it just seems like they all figure it out as soon as they get there. Brent Honeywell having a great outing the other day. Just a joke. Not saying we're a bad team for getting rid of these guys. But you also saw some of the players that I had in that big piece too, Gary. I think that gave a pretty good idea of what I personally think the Pirates were going to go after. I know a lot of people are saying, shoot for the stars, go get Luis Robert, go get Jazz Chisholm, go get Vladdy, go get this guy that's going to be a marquee guy. I just don't think they need to. I don't think they have to do that.
I got to tell you, Ethan, man, I've had questions about Luis Robert. I really have. And I think that you can chalk up what you watched this weekend to potentially just a good player playing on a really bad team and it rubbing off. But I've seen this a lot with him, and it's a lack of effort. And I think the double for O'Neal Cruz had no business being a double. Like there's just a lot of red flags there with Luis Robert. Not the least of which is the injuries. You talk about the Jazz Chisholm situation. Well, same kind of thing. And they're starting to like use him like at second base to kind of showcase that he's more than just a center fielder in case you might want to get him for something else. Problem is, I don't like Jazz Chisholm. I don't like his game. I think the hype has always outweighed his actual performance. I just don't see that as something that I would want to spend an awful lot on for any reason, really. Is he an upgrade over what the Pirates have? Yeah, but I feel like I'm going to be asking for another upgrade next year if you go that route. And, and him playing second base is really inconsequential. The Pirates don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
So, great. Center field's what you got. Vladdy and Bichette aren't going anywhere. The Toronto Blue Jays have decided they want to make one more run next year. That makes sense because they're going into a deep, dark rebuild after that.
Yep.
There isn't much left. And then you can see next year or even this offseason potentially they move on from Gaussman and Kikuchi and they start just cleaning house. So I don't think you're going to see that at this deadline. There's not a lot of big pieces out there. That's the misnomer. There just aren't. And the big pieces that you kind of think are, like Pete Alonso, well, they're right in the heart of the wild card race themselves. And you're going to spend an awful lot for 60 games of a guy. I'm not sure I want to do that. I'm not sure that the Pirates are even in a place where you would think that's a smart play.
Yeah. And I think me and you have been in pretty good cahoots about this as well, is that I think we're definitely wanting the Pirates to go get guys that have control. Like on my show yesterday, I'll just use the example. I discussed Isaac Paredes from the Tampa Bay Rays as a potential target for this team because you're not just getting him for this you're not just getting him for this year. And I think that's a big moniker that I want to add to what the Pirates need to do at this deadline is don't get me wrong. I'd love if they got Jesse Winker. I think that would be a phenomenal addition to this team, but it doesn't fix anything long term. He's not here after 60
And same
games.
team, though, I'd rather have Thompson because he's got a year of control, a more steady track record than Winker, even though Winker has some higher end power numbers. I personally would go that route. I'd rather have a guy that helps me this year, helps me next year.
Yeah.
Even so, that doesn't help the way the Pirates really need help. They need a center fielder. And that's not a center fielder. I just don't see that. I see Doyle in Colorado maybe being a guy you could pry away. And he can certainly play center field. I don't think he's 100% great acquisition either, but he's a guy that would have some control. He's at least Connor Joe with some more speed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't think it's that plentiful out there. But I think if you're creative and you trade something off of the Major League roster for something that comes back to contribute to the Major League roster, unlike what you were talking about with Martin Perez or something along those lines, you have to consider you might be able to pry away somebody that isn't being utilized properly. Maybe you go to LA and offer them Martin Perez for James Outman and toss in a lottery ticket for them. Yeah. There's got to be something like that you can parlay into help for both sides and the future, really.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to our next talking point about just living in the moment right now, folks. We're going to talk about living in the moment, more trade deadline thoughts, and so much more to end. I was going to say cap off, but both, I guess, work. We're going to cap off today's show by talking about that on today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply because with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. You also can get all-in pricing by toggling the feature. It shows you your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. I've used Game Time plenty of times to go to PNC Park and meet all of you. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off, and download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, and welcome back to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day, kicking off a week full of guests. We had Michael on the show shortly yesterday to discuss the Connor Griffin pick. Gary on today's show. We'll have plenty of other guests on the show this week. Seeing as it is All-Star Week, things kind of slow down news-wise a little bit, so tons of topics we're going to have throughout everything. Obviously, Paul Skeens starting the All-Star game tomorrow will be a big deal, so we'll obviously be covering that on Wednesday, talking about a little bit of it tomorrow. And I think that that's a great start to living in the moment of what it is to be a Pirates fan right now. The existence of being a Pirates fan can be very agitating because you look at this team right now and you could say they're one or two pieces away from being a wild card team. That is a lot easier said than done. But again, they're 48-48. They're a game and a half out of the wild card. Their young starting pitcher is the starting pitcher for the National League in the All-Star game. And they have more pieces coming eventually. Maybe not this year, but you're looking at the Bubba Chandlers of the world and the Termar Johnsons of the world who started in the Futures game. That could be up here as soon as next year. You look at some guys like Anthony Solometto. A lot of you guys like Charles McAdoo for some reason. I don't know what the McAdoo frenzy is, but I see you guys talk about him all the time. There's a lot to like. I think I would argue, Gary, there's a lot more to like about this iteration of the Pittsburgh Pirates than there isn't. And I'll let you give your thoughts on that. I just genuinely do.
Part of living in the moment is realizing that this isn't the defining moment.
No.
You know, this isn't like 1992 where you knew Barry Bonds was leaving and you knew that they weren't going to be able to afford to keep Bobby Bonilla, and you knew Andy Van Slyke was half dead and his knees were falling apart and there was no way they were going to keep him long term, and Jay Bell was on his way out and Doug Drabeck wanted to go and John Smiley had already just been. This isn't that. The team is not at the end of their control. They're at the very beginning of their control, and they've locked up some players to make sure that they're going to be here towards the end of the decade. You're at the very beginning of this competitive window, okay? And you can choose to not believe Ben Cherington's goal of like keeping this team competitive. That's completely within your right. It's certainly what you've seen. But living in the moment, it really kind of comes down to your expectations, right? If you had expectations that this team was going to do things that they've never done and go out and start making blockbuster trades with all the prospects they have in order to try to win in two years or whatever, that's not what they're doing. They're trying to build a team that they feel can stay competitive for a while. That's going to take a while, this year included. It's taken as long as it has because that's been their plan. I've tried to warn you all along the way that that's what was going to happen. So, I mean, like, I guess you can get upset with me that I'm not upset, but it's kind of what I've been saying was going to happen. So I'm not upset.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at, again, how they've kind of – I mean, I know you're not a big draft guy either, but look at what they did yesterday. They drafted 3 high upside high schoolers that a lot of people were saying, oh, there goes the trying to win now window. They never really even said – they said they wanted to be competitive this year. Remember this. Me and Gary talked about this in February and March. that they said they wanted to be a winning baseball team. They never said that they wanted to win now. They said they want to be a winning or competitive baseball team. That is what they are.
I'd also say, like, if you're going into a Major League Baseball draft thinking you're getting help for next year, you're not getting that very often. Paul Skeens is the last one I can think of that's done that and really done it.
Yeah.
I mean, you got like the first baseman in Los Angeles. Please.
Oh, no, Nolan Chanel.
Like, you'd take him on your team right now because you don't have a first baseman, but he's not a star. Not yet.
The only other guy from the draft last year that you can even make in the same light and argument as Skeens is Wyatt Langford, and he's been hurt for 2.5 months and slowed down considerably since then.
Paul Skeens is so freakish that
Yeah.
he's made Dylan Cruz look like a nothing prospect, and he's already in AAA and just got drafted last year.
Yep.
So let's really, really check ourselves and realize that we've been pretty spoiled by Paul Skeens, and we've been pretty spoiled, honestly, by how quickly Henry Davis got here. That was ridiculous, too. And maybe the Pirates screwed up and shouldn't have brought him up. Huh? Maybe? Are we kind of getting to that point? You don't draft college players in the Major League draft and expect help next year. It just is not a way you do things. You draft the best player available. Even this Connor, this kid they got, whatever. Yeah. You're talking like super high-end talent, probably the highest-end talent there is available in this draft. And that comes with a really, really low floor possibility too. That's what high school kids are. Like, you're drafting the best potential talent. That's it. Not help for next year. If you're looking that way, I'm not even sure what you're doing. I'm not even sure that you're trying to build a team.
Yeah.
I think you're just being stupid. But
well, and one more point on that before we wrap up that part of the conversation and wrap up the show. For all of you that also said that also love watching Bubba Chandler tear things apart in Altoona and Termar Johnson tear things apart in Greensboro, wonder where those guys came out of when they got drafted. And also will probably debut next year, 3 years after they were drafted.
And it's the same kind of thing. It's that prep school type player, that they're a little bit more advanced. This isn't like you went down to Seneca Valley and plucked somebody off of the cow pasture they play in.
Yep.
You're talking to somebody that has been playing near professional level baseball for a couple of years already.
Yeah.
So,
and at the end of the day, it all gels together how it gels together. And that's why you have people that get paid the big bucks to make those decisions. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I couldn't have told you who Levi Sterling was before they drafted him. I couldn't have told you who the other kid was before they drafted him. I knew the top 20 prospects, and that was about it. And I knew that I wanted Charlie Condon to somehow fall to this team because hitting bombs in PNC Park would have fulfilled my happiness as a Georgia fan. But at the end of the day, folks, live in the moment, have fun with this team, because I've been having fun covering this team all year. Gary has had a lot of fun doing it over on his show. And may I add, folks, we are doing awesome work over there at Steel City Pirates. If you like me on this show, if you like Gary on the show and his show, make sure you go check out our writing work, because I'd argue it's even better. I would argue that our writing work is even better than our podcast work. Gary, what do you have planned for the fan forum this week?
Fan forum, just Jim and I think we're just going to kind of chill. I'm trying to get a guest, but we'll see if it pans out or not. That'll be Thursday at 5. Today on the website, though, we got 5 Pirates Thoughts at 5. Joe Boyd's got his comp pick piece that he does every year about how the Pirates' first round of picks compare to other major league players. And Corey has a nice breakdown of all of the people that were drafted as well. A little bit more in depth.
So make sure you guys go check that out. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday. And one last thing to all of the people that waited 11 years alongside me for another college football video game. We made it, boys. We're here. have fun today. I understand if you don't get off at work until 4 and don't listen to the show today. Trust me, I understand because I will be doing it right alongside you. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday, folks. We'll see you tomorrow, I believe, with Connor Williams. We will make sure that's confirmed on Twitter later, but have a wonderful rest of your Monday. See you on the flip side.